Another thing to pay attention to is the names specifically in the genealogy. Those of you who cannot see the screen right now, I have every single name that mentions, all 42 names mentioned in Matthew up here on the screen. But for those who can't see it, I've highlighted 5 names. Well, I've highlighted more. I've highlighted Abraham and David. But other than those, I've highlighted 5 names. We have Tamar, and these are all women. And it's kind of unusual. You have all these men, and then you have 5 women that seems to be random in there. You have Tamar, you have Rachav, you have Ruth, and then it says the wife of Urias, who is Bathsheba. And then you have a 5th name, and that is Mother Mary. That is Mary all the way at the bottom of the list. Now, the question is, what are we to do with these 5 names of women? Well, if we line them up, we get this story. So first we have Tamar. Who was Tamar? So if you remember, Tamar conceived of twins, Perez and Zerah, the former of which was the ancestor of David. What's interesting about Tamar is that it's not only that she is an ancestor of David, but it's how she got pregnant. If you remember the Judah and Tamar story, Judah, one of the sons of Jacob, has the situation where his son marries Tamar and his son dies, and then another son marries her and refuses to impregnate her, and then the Lord kills him off, and then another son, he's too young, actually another son refuses to impregnate her, the Lord kills him, and then finally another son who's too young to marry Tamar, Judah says, in the future my 3rd son will marry Tamar. Okay, so then he grows up and they're not married. Judah goes against his word. So Tamar gets desperate to stay into the family and to stay connected to Judah and that household. So she dresses up as a prostitute and stands at the gate of one of the towns that she knows Judah is coming to. And Judah shows up, doesn't recognize Tamar. She's in disguise as a prostitute. He sleeps with her, gets her pregnant, and the result is these twins. Okay, so it's a very scandalous story. And so we learn that Tamar, she has a questionable past, sexual profile, a questionable sexual profile, and she's an ancestor of David. Okay, what about the next woman? We have Rachav. If you remember, Rachav is the harlot who bore Boaz. Boaz is also an ancestor of David, and we read about this in Ruth 4. So again, a non-Israelite, a questionable sexual profile, she's a harlot, and an ancestor of David. Then we get to Ruth. Again, you read the story of Ruth. She is a non-Israelite ancestor of David, who also appears to have engaged in sexual sin with Boaz. We're not quite sure exactly what the nature of this sexual sin is. It might not be sexual, but it does seem to be something strange going on where she goes into where Boaz is sleeping, and it says she uncovers his feet and then lays with him, and he's kind of surprised when he gets up, and it seems to be that there's something going on that's unsavory. But who knows? Either way, she's a non-Israelite, and she's an ancestor of David. The 4th woman, Bathsheba, the wife of Uriah. We all know that story. She commits adultery with David. Okay, what do we do with this? I think that the author of Matthew is strategically highlighting these women, placing them in the genealogy to make a statement. Now, what statement is that? Well, if we look at the rumors, if we look at some of the ancient texts, we see that rumors had circulated that Mary conceived Jesus out of wedlock. Here's a few examples. In John 8:41, and you can go look at the full context, but in John 8:41, there's a group of people who say, we are not illegitimate children. And it seems to be implying that they think that Jesus is an illegitimate child. And they say, we are not illegitimate children. That's in John 8. Also, in addition to that, there are Jewish texts, rabbinic texts, they preserved a scandal, this rumor, that Mary had committed adultery with a Roman soldier named Panthera. They even give the guy's name, Panthera. Now, Origen, here's a 3rd century Christian theologian. He lived 185 to 254 CE. He verifies this, and he says, let us return, however, to the words put into the mouth of the Jew, this Jewish guy that he's talking about in his text. Okay, so let's return, however, to the words put into the mouth of the Jew, where, quote, the mother of Jesus is described as having been turned out by the carpenter who was betrothed to her, as she had been convicted of adultery and had a child by a certain soldier named Panthera. So there's a little bit of internal evidence in the Gospels that this rumor was going around, also in Jewish literature and in early Christian literature, that this rumor had stuck around and that it was there. Okay, what seems to be happening is that the author of Matthew knows about these. He's writing 40 to 50 years after the death of Jesus. He knows about these rumors, and he wants to deal with that head on. And he wants to say that even if Mary had Jesus out of wedlock, and that Jesus was born in a sort of scandalous situation, he still could be the Messiah. After all, look at all these other women who were ancestors of David. The line of David came through these non-Israelite women and women who were questionable in terms of their sexual purity or whatever. I think he's trying to deal with this head on. Obviously, well, I don't know if it's obvious, but Christians don't believe that Jesus was born out of wedlock, and that probably the author of Matthew doesn't believe that. But he's dealing with this head on. Now, notice that Mary's conception, in the story, Matthew, Mary's conception immediately follows Jesus' genealogy. So he gives Jesus' genealogy, and then he jumps right to Mary's conception. So there's evidence that he's saying, okay, here's the story of the lineage of David leading to Jesus, and then he's trying to clear that up, trying to deal with that scandal, and then he jumps right to Mary's conception. So that helps us understand what the author of Matthew is trying to do. There's a few other things we need to think about. In the Gospel of Matthew, in Jesus' genealogy, Jesus is inextricably linked to royalty, the Judaic kings in David's line. He's definitely making this claim. Jesus is the son of royalty. We finally get to the Gospel of Luke a little bit. What the author of Luke is doing is the opposite. There's no line of kings. He is not trying to show that Jesus is royalty, or at least his lineage. Jesus does not descend through David's son Solomon, but through David's son Nathan. This situates probably Jesus within the prophecy of Isaiah 11:1, where we see the prophecy of the stump of Jesse, or this terminology, the stump of Jesse. The author of Luke seems to want to bypass the kingship lineage of Judah that went awry, and instead trace the Messiah back to the stump of Jesse, showing that God would restore Israel through a new branch of David through Jesus. So that's the end of this video, but I want you guys, if you want to know more about this subject, go to the book, The Strangers in Jerusalem. You'll get more there. And next time we'll move forward to the Jesus traditions of his birth and the Jewish context of his birth. So.